The transport ship glided through the docking bay with practiced ease. Inside, Prince Kael'thor stood at the viewing window. His 6 arms crossed in a display of confidence. His silver skin gleamed under the station's lights, and his 3 eyes focused on the massive structure before him. Harmony's Gate, they called it. The neutral ground where the greatest powers in the galaxy came to talk instead of fight. "We have arrived, my prince," said Zethmar, his advisor. The older Vex Nari bowed slightly, his movements slow. With age and wisdom, Kael'thor barely acknowledged him. His mind was on greater things. This was his first major summit, his first chance to show his father and the Empire that he was ready to lead. For 12,000 years, the Vex Nari had ruled 200 star systems. They were strong, they were ancient, they were superior to all others. "How many delegations are present?" Kael'thor asked. 53 species have sent representatives, my prince. The Korthan Empire, the Zephyr Collective, the Drani Federation, and of course, the humans. Kael'thor's middle eye narrowed at the mention of humans. "The newcomers are here? How amusing. 50 years in space, and they believe they deserve a seat at this table." They were granted membership by council vote, my prince. It is not our place to question. Everything is our place to question, Zethmar. We are Vex Nari. The docking process completed with a soft thud. Kael'thor straightened his formal robes, each layer representing a century of his family's rule. He stepped toward the airlock, his guards falling into formation behind him. The station interior was impressive even by Vex Nari standards. Ceilings stretched high above, decorated with symbols from every member species. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors. Some walked, some floated, some slithered. The galaxy was diverse, but the Vex Nari stood above them all, or so Kael'thor believed. As his entourage moved through the main corridor toward the delegation quarters, Kael'thor studied the other species. He noted the Korthan representatives, their fur groomed perfectly, their mechanical enhancements gleaming. The Drani moved in their characteristic swarm pattern, hundreds of small bodies acting as one mind. The Zephyr drifted past, their crystalline forms catching the light. And then he saw them. The humans. There were 5 of them standing near a communication panel. They wore simple, dark blue uniforms with minimal decoration. No grand robes. No displays of wealth or power. They looked so plain, so ordinary. Kael'thor felt a wave of disappointment. These were the beings that had caused so much discussion in council chambers. One of the humans noticed the Vex Nari procession. He was tall by human standards, with short brown hair beginning to gray at the temples. His face showed the marks of age, lines around his eyes and mouth. He wore a simple insignia on his chest that read, Commander J. Miller. The human made eye contact with Kael'thor. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Commander Miller gave a small nod, nothing more, and returned to his conversation with his companions. That was all. No bow, no greeting, no acknowledgement of Vex Nari superiority. Kael'thor felt his secondary hearts flutter with indignation. Did you see that? Zethmar. The human barely acknowledged us. Based. Perhaps he did not recognize your status, my prince. Then he is ignorant, which is worse. They continued to their quarters. The rooms assigned to the Vex Nari delegation were spacious and well-appointed, as befitted their station. Kael'thor dismissed his guards and stood alone on the balcony overlooking the station's central hub. Below, thousands of beings moved about their business. He spotted the human delegation again. They were walking together toward the conference levels. One of them, a female, with blonde hair tied back, was reviewing something on a data pad. Another, a male with darker skin, was laughing at something his companion had said. They looked so relaxed, so unbothered by the weight of galactic politics. It irritated Kael'thor in ways he couldn't quite explain. The opening ceremony took place that evening in the Grand Assembly Hall. Representatives from all 53 species gathered in the vast circular chamber. Seats were arranged in concentric rings, with the most influential delegations closest to the center platform. The Vexnari sat in the third ring, a position of respect and power. Kael'thor scanned the chamber, noting the positions of other major players. The Korthen were in the second ring. The Draeni in the fourth. And there, in the seventh ring, sat the humans, the seventh ring, where minor powers and new members were placed. Kael'thor smiled. At least someone understood proper hierarchy. The Council Arbiter, a being of pure energy contained in a crystal matrix, began the proceedings. Its voice echoed through the chamber, without need for translation technology. Every species heard it in their own way, understood it perfectly. "We gather in this place of peace," the Arbiter intoned, "to address the challenges facing our galaxy. Border disputes, trade disagreements, and the emerging threat from the outer rim sectors. All voices will be heard. All concerns will be addressed." The ceremony continued with speeches from various delegations. The Korthan spoke of trade routes. The Draeni discussed resource management. The Zephyr presented concerns about space-time anomalies near their territory. The humans said nothing. Kael'thor noticed this. Through all the speeches, all the grand statements, the human delegation simply sat and listened. Commander Miller occasionally spoke quietly with the blonde female beside him, but they made no attempt to address the assembly. Were they intimidated? Kael'thor wondered. Did they finally understand how small they were in this great gathering? After the ceremony, there was a reception in one of the station's social chambers. Delegates mingled, forming alliances and discussing private matters. Kael'thor moved through the crowd with practiced grace, exchanging pleasantries with representatives from lesser powers, nodding to equals, and maintaining proper distance from the few he considered peers. He found himself near the human delegation. They stood in a small group, drinks in hand, speaking among themselves. Kael'thor drifted closer, curious about these strange newcomers. "The outer rim situation is more complex than the reports suggest," Commander Miller was saying. "We've seen evidence of coordinated attacks, not random piracy." The blonde female, whose nameplate read Dr. L. Grant, nodded. "The patterns match classical insurgency tactics. Someone is testing response times and defensive capabilities. We should present our findings to the Security Committee," said another human, older, with white hair. His nameplate identified him as Ambassador K. Parker. Kael'thor couldn't help himself. He stepped slightly closer and spoke, his translator converting his words to human languages. "Forgive my interruption, but did I hear correctly? You believe you have insights into the outer rim situation?" The humans turned to face him. Commander Miller's expression remained neutral. "Prince Kael'thor, a pleasure to meet you." "Yes, we've been conducting research on the attacks." "How interesting," Kael'thor said, his tone making clear he found it anything but interesting. "Your people have been in space for, what, 50 years? And you believe you understand threats that have puzzled established powers for decades?" Dr. Grant's eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice remained calm. "Fresh perspectives can be valuable, Your Highness. Sometimes, those closest to a problem have difficulty seeing new solutions. Or sometimes," Kael'thor replied, "inexperience is mistaken for insight." Silence fell over the small group. Other nearby delegates paused their conversations, sensing tension. Kael'thor felt satisfied. Let them know their place. Commander Miller looked at the prince for a long moment. His face showed no anger, no offense, no reaction at all. He simply nodded once, the same small nod from earlier, and then turned back to his companions. "We should review the data again before tomorrow's session," he said, as if Kael'thor had never spoken. The human delegation walked away, leaving the prince standing alone. Zethmar appeared at Kael'thor's side. "My prince, perhaps. They are rude," Kael'thor interrupted. "Did you see? They simply walked away. They did not engage in argument." Zethmar observed carefully. "Perhaps they chose discretion. They chose cowardice." Kale Thor watched the humans disappear into the crowd. This summit will be educational for them. They will learn what real power looks like. Quote. Quote. Zethmar said nothing. But something in his old eyes suggested concern. He had lived too long, and seen too much, to mistake silence for weakness. But the prince was young, and the young must learn their own lessons. Even when those lessons cut deep. The next morning brought the first working session. Delegates gathered in smaller conference rooms to discuss specific issues. Kyle Thor attended the security briefing, where military matters and defense concerns were addressed. It was here that real power was displayed, where species showed their strength through fleet numbers and strategic capabilities. The room was smaller than the Grand Assembly Hall, but still impressive. Holographic displays floated above the central table, showing star charts and threat assessments. 20 delegations had representatives in this session. The Vex Nari, the Korthan, the Drani, and yes, Commander Miller sat 3 seats away from Kale Thor. The older human had brought Dr. Grant with him. They both studied the displays quietly, occasionally making notes on their data pads. A Korthan general was presenting information about the Outer Rim attacks. We have lost 17 cargo vessels in the past 6 months, he growled, his mechanical jaw clicking. The attacks show increasing sophistication. We believe a new faction has emerged. The Vexnary fleet has also experienced losses, Kyle Thor added, standing to address the room. 8 ships. But we have responded with strength. We have increased patrols and eliminated 3 pirate bases. Murmurs of approval circled the room. This was how power worked. You stated your strength, demonstrated your capability, and others respected you for it. The human delegation has requested to speak, announced the session moderator, a floating zephyr crystal. Commander Miller stood. He moved to the holographic display and gestured. New data appeared, overlaying the existing star charts. We've been tracking the attacks for 4 months. The pattern suggests these are not random pirate actions. Kale Thor felt his irritation rising again. Commander, with respect, the Vexnary have been dealing with piracy for thousands of years. We understand these patterns well. Asa, Miller turned to face him. I'm sure you do, Your Highness. However, our analysis suggests something different. He gestured again, and the hologram shifted. Red lines appeared, connecting attack sites. Notice the timing. Attacks occur in clusters, then stop for exactly 12 days, then resume in a different sector. Dr. Grant added, the 12-day cycle matches the patrol rotation schedules of most major fleets. Someone is watching and learning. Interesting theory, Kale Thor said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. But theories from newcomers should perhaps be tested before presentation at such gatherings. We have tested it, Miller replied calmly. We predicted the last 3 attack locations. We were correct each time. 4. This drew surprised reactions from around the room. The Korthan general leaned forward. You predicted the attacks? Where? The Zephyr mining colony at Sigma 7, the Drani agricultural station at Kepler 442, and the independent trading post at Wolf 359. Wolf 359? The Korthan's eyes widened. That attack happened 2 days ago. How could you know? Pattern analysis, Dr. Grant said simply. If we're correct, the next attack will occur in the Arcturus system, approximately 8 days from now. The room erupted in discussion. Delegates spoke rapidly among themselves. Even the stoic Drani representatives broke their usual silence to debate among their swarm. Kale Thor felt something cold settle in his chest. He had not predicted any attacks. His fleet commanders had not presented such analysis. But these humans, these newcomers with barely 50 years of space travel, had found a pattern? No. It had to be luck. Or perhaps deception. Anyone can make predictions, Kale Thor declared loudly, silencing the room. Actually, stopping these attacks requires real military capability. Something that takes centuries to develop. Not decades. Miller looked at him again with that same neutral expression. "You're absolutely right, Your Highness, which is why we hope established powers like the Vex Nari will take this information and use it effectively." He sat down, the discussion apparently over from his perspective. Kyle Thor remained standing, feeling as though he should say more, should assert dominance somehow. But the moment had passed. The other delegates were already discussing the human predictions, debating their validity. He sat down slowly, aware that Zethmar was watching him with those ancient, knowing eyes. The days that followed formed a pattern of their own. Kale Thor found himself in session after session with the human delegation, and in each one, he felt compelled to challenge them, to put them in their place. During a trade discussion, he questioned human economic models. "Your species has barely established interstellar commerce. Perhaps you should observe and learn, rather than propose new systems." Ambassador Parker, the white-haired human, responded with patience. "We appreciate the advice, Your Highness. Our models are based on mathematical principles, which remain constant regardless of how long a species has been in space." In a technology exchange forum, Kale Thor openly mocked human ship designs. "Your vessels are functional, I suppose, in the way that primitive tools are functional. They lack the elegance and refinement of proper engineering." Captain Ryan Foster, a human military officer attending the session, smiled slightly. "Function over form has served us well, Your Highness. Our ships may not be pretty, but they go where we need them to go, and do what we need them to do." "Barely," Kale Thor muttered, loud enough to be heard. Captain Foster's smile didn't change. He simply nodded and returned to his notes. It was always the same. Kale Thor would challenge, would assert, would demonstrate his superiority, and the humans would respond with calm acknowledgement and then move on, as if his words were nothing more than background noise. It infuriated him. On the fourth day, the Security Committee reconvened to discuss the Outer Rim situation further. The Arcturus system attack had occurred exactly as the humans predicted. A cargo vessel was ambushed, though this time a Korthan patrol ship arrived quickly enough to drive off the attackers. The room buzzed with energy. The human prediction had been correct. "Remarkable analysis," the Korthan general admitted grudgingly. "Commander Miller, your intelligence capabilities are more advanced than we realized. We simply looked at the available data with fresh eyes," Miller replied. Kale Thor stood abruptly. "This proves nothing except that even a stopped clock is correct twice a day. One accurate prediction does not make humanity a military power. You have no history of real warfare, no centuries of strategic development, no legacy of victory." The room went quiet. Other delegates exchanged glances. This was the third day in a row that the prince had openly challenged the human delegation. It was becoming uncomfortable to witness. Miller stood slowly. He looked directly at Kale Thor, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Something deeper, older, but it passed quickly, replaced again by that neutral calm. "You're correct, Your Highness. We have no ancient military legacy. We've only been at this for 50 years. He paused. "We're still learning. We, too, learning." Then he sat down. That was all. No argument. No defense. Just simple agreement and dismissal. Kyle Thor felt heat rise in his face. His multiple hearts beat faster. "Still learning," he repeated mockingly. "Perhaps humanity should remain students and leave galactic security to those with actual experience. Perhaps." Miller agreed quietly. The session moderator quickly moved to the next topic, but Kale Thor barely heard it. He was focused on the human commander, on that infuriating calm acceptance. Later, in private quarters, Zethmar approached his prince carefully. "My lord, I must speak plainly." "Then, speak. Your challenges to the human delegation are becoming noticeable. Other species are watching. Some are beginning to whisper. Let them whisper." I am simply stating truth. Humanity is new, inexperienced, unproven. They need to understand their place. And what place is that, my prince? Below us. Below all established powers. They should be grateful for the opportunity to observe and learn, not presume to offer opinions and analysis as if they were equals. Zethmar was quiet for a long moment. My prince, I have served your family for 90 years. I have seen many species rise and fall. May I offer a word of caution? Always, old friend. The humans have not responded to your provocations with anger. They have not challenged you back. They have not shown offense. He paused. In my experience, when a being does not rise to provocation, it is for one of two reasons. Either they are weak and afraid, or they are strong and unconcerned. You think they are strong? Kale Thor laughed. Have you seen their delegation? 5 individuals with no guards, no display of power, no assertion of dominance. They are afraid to challenge me because they know they would lose. Perhaps, Zethmar said softly, or perhaps they simply do not see you as a threat worth responding to. The words hit Kale Thor like a physical blow. What did you say? Forgive me, my prince. I speak only from concern. But consider, a great hunter does not respond when a small creature barks at it. The hunter simply continues on its path, unconcerned. You compare me to a small creature? I compare the situation to a possibility. I suggest caution. Kale Thor turned away, dismissing his advisor with a wave. But the words lingered. Not a threat worth responding to. His family ruled 200 systems for 12,000 years. And yet, the humans continued their calm dismissal of everything he said. That evening, Senator Gregory Hayes arrived at the station. He was a human politician, apparently important in their government structure. Kale Thor watched from a viewing gallery as the senator was greeted by Commander Miller and the rest of the human delegation. There was a brief exchange. Senator Hayes looked angry about something, gesturing emphatically. Commander Miller remained still, listening. Ambassador Parker joined the conversation, placing a hand on the senator's shoulder. The discussion continued for several minutes before the senator nodded reluctantly and followed the others to their quarters. Interesting, Kale Thor thought. Even among humans, there was disagreement. Perhaps not everyone in their delegation agreed with Miller's passive approach. On the 6th day, Kale Thor made his boldest statement yet. During a General Assembly session, attended by all delegations, he rose to speak when the topic of council membership requirements came up. I believe we must address an uncomfortable truth, he announced. The Galactic Council was founded by species with proven capability, with centuries of stable civilization, with demonstrated wisdom. These requirements exist for good reason. He paused, letting his words sink in. I question whether humanity truly meets these standards. 50 years is not enough time to prove stability. Perhaps their membership was premature. Gasps echoed through the chamber. To question another species' membership was a serious matter, bordering on insult. Kale Thor continued. I propose that newer members have a provisional status, with limited voting rights until they demonstrate true capability over, say, 200 years. He sat down, satisfied. That would force a response. That would make them defend themselves, show their weakness. Commander Miller stood. The entire assembly focused on him. Here it comes, Kale Thor thought. Finally, they will show their true nature. The prince raises interesting points about membership requirements, Miller said calmly. It's important to discuss how the council maintains its standards. We respect the prince's perspective and thank him for his candor. Then he sat down. That was all. No defense, no argument, just polite acknowledgement. The assembly moderator, clearly uncomfortable, moved quickly to other business. But Kale Thor barely heard the rest of the session. His mind spun with confusion and growing frustration. Why wouldn't they fight back? Zethmar could not sleep. The old advisor lay in his quarters, his mind troubled by patterns he was beginning to see. Patterns that his young prince was too inexperienced to notice. He had watched the other delegations carefully these past days. When Prince Thor made his provocative statements about humanity, the reactions were not what they should have been. The Korthan did not laugh along. The Drani did not show agreement. Even minor powers, who should have been pleased to see humanity challenged, seemed uncomfortable. And there was something else. When Commander Miller responded with his calm acceptance, several delegates would exchange quick glances, not mocking glances. Something else. Something that looked almost like respect, or perhaps recognition. At dawn, Zethmar rose and dressed in simple robes. He made his way to the station's historical archives, a vast digital library containing records of every council session, every first contact, every significant event in galactic history for the past 3,000 years. The archive interface recognized him immediately. "Welcome, Advisor Zethmar. How may I assist you? I need information about humanity. Complete records since first contact. Processing request. First contact with humanity occurred 52 years ago. Compiling records." Data began flowing across multiple screens. Zethmar read quickly, his old eyes still sharp for such work. The initial reports were standard. Humanity discovered faster than light travel. First contact made with Zephyr explorers. Diplomatic relations established. Application for council membership. Submitted after the standard observation period. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained the reactions Zethmar was seeing. But then he noticed something. There was a gap in the records. Years 23 through 31 of human spaceflight showed minimal documentation, just basic entries about territorial claims and resource development. No diplomatic correspondence. No cultural exchanges. Why is there limited information for this period? Zethmar asked the archive. Records for that period are classified under Council Security Protocol 7. Zethmar's multiple hearts beat faster. Protocol 7 was reserved for military conflicts between council members. Who has authority to access these records? Number. Council arbiter, current delegation heads, and military historians with proper clearance. Can you provide any unclassified summary of events during this period? A pause. Limited summary available. The period in question involved first contact diplomatic complications that were resolved through negotiated settlement. All parties agreed to restricted information access to facilitate reconciliation. Diplomatic complications. Negotiated settlement. The careful language of official records hiding something significant. Zethmar left the archives and made his way to a communication terminal. He sent a secure message to an old friend, General Tharnex of the Korthan military. They had served together on various council committees over the years. If anyone would speak truthfully, it would be Tharnex. The reply came an hour later. Meet me at Observation Deck 7. Come. Alone. The observation deck was quiet at this hour. The Korthan general stood at the viewing window, his mechanical enhancements glinting in the starlight. He did not turn when Zethmar approached. "You want to know about the humans?" Tharnex said. It was not a question. "My prince has been challenging them. They do not respond. I need to understand why. Your prince is young. He does not remember the first contact war." Zethmar felt cold spread through his body. There was a war? Not officially. That's why the records are sealed. But yes, there was a war. And I was there. Thanks for watching. And greeting the scene. And let's the 21 and 40. The general finally turned to face him. Humanity emerged into galactic space at an unfortunate time. 3 major powers were expanding aggressively in that sector. The next space, the Korthan Dominion, the Regal Hierarchy, and the Crimson Alliance. We all claimed the systems humanity had begun to colonize. What happened? Humanity refused to yield their colonies. They said these were their people, their settlements, and they would defend them. We thought it was bravado. A species with 50 years in space, Challenging 3 established powers? Tharnex laughed bitterly. We thought we would teach them a quick lesson, and we were wrong. The general moved back to the window. The war lasted 8 years. 8 years of brutal fighting. Humanity lost ships, lost colonies, lost millions of their people. But they learned, Zethmar. They learned faster than any species I have ever encountered. Learned what? Everything. Our tactics, our weapons, our strategies. In the first year, we destroyed their fleets easily. In the second year, their ships lasted longer in battle. By the third year, they were fighting us to standstills. By the 5th year, they were winning engagements. Tharnex's voice carried a tone Zethmar had never heard from the proud warrior. It sounded like respect mixed with something else. Fear. What ended the war? Commander Jason Miller ended it. Zethmar's breath caught. The same Miller who is here now? The same. He was a young captain then, commanding a small defense fleet protecting the colony of Proxima. We sent 2,000 ships to take that system. He had 200 ships, many of them damaged from previous battles. Tharnex paused. He held us for 6 days. That is impossible. That is what I thought too. But he used tactics we had never seen. His ships moved in patterns that seemed random, but were perfectly calculated. He used the asteroid fields, the planet's gravity wells, even the star's radiation as weapons. His crews worked with a coordination that suggested a hive mind. But they were individuals, every ship captain making independent decisions that somehow worked in perfect harmony. 6 days, Zethmar whispered. 6 days. Long enough for human reinforcements to arrive from 3 different sectors. When they came, they brought new ship designs, new weapons, new tactics. We had taught them how to fight us, and they learned the lessons well. The general turned back to Zethmar. We proposed peace. The Regal Hierarchy and Crimson Alliance agreed. We were winning battles, but we were no longer certain we would win the war, and the casualties were mounting on all sides. The humans accepted peace? They did. But they dictated terms. They kept all their colonies. They gained recognition as an independent power, and they made us agree to sealed records so that younger generations would not grow up seeking revenge. Tharnex's mechanical jaw clicked. They were wise enough to give us a way to save face. That wisdom is why we agreed. Zethmar processed this information slowly. How many ships do they have now? Current intelligence estimates place human fleet strength at approximately 18,000 vessels. That is 3rd largest in known space, behind only the Drani Swarm and the Zephyr Collective. 3rd largest? In 50 years? They build fast. They learn faster. The general placed a heavy paw on Zethmar's shoulder. This is why your prince's provocations trouble those of us who know. We watch Commander Miller sit there calmly, accepting insults, and we remember what happened when that same calm man was pushed too far. We remember the Battle of Proxima. We remember the cost of underestimating humanity. Why has no one told Kael'thor? It is not our place to educate a Vexnari prince. And perhaps some of us are curious to see what will happen. Will the humans remain patient? Or will they remind the galaxy why most species now treat them with respect? The general removed his paw. I have answered your questions, old friend. What you do with this information is your choice. Zethmar left the observation deck with his mind racing. He needed to verify this information, needed to understand more. He returned to the archives, but this time he went to the public news records, the unclassified information that anyone could access. He searched for references to human military capabilities. The official records were sparse, but cross-referencing with trade reports, ship construction permits, and colony defense announcements painted a clear picture. The humans had indeed built a massive fleet. They had shipyards orbiting 15 different planets. They had research facilities developing new technologies at a pace that other species found alarming. Then Zethmar found something else. A speech given by Admiral Helen Brooks at a human military ceremony 3 years ago. The speech was public, translated into multiple languages, available to anyone who looked for it. "We remember the early years," Admiral Brooks had said. "We remember the colonies that burned. We remember the ships that died protecting our people. We learned hard lessons in those days. We learned that space is not friendly. We learned that we cannot rely on others for our security. We learned that the only thing standing between our families and destruction is our willingness to stand firm." 1. The speech continued. "But we also learned that endless war benefits no one. We learned that former enemies can become partners. We learned that strength is not just about weapons, but about wisdom. Our military doctrine is simple. Never strike first. Never forget. Never forgive. But always be willing to work toward a better future. Never strike first. Never forget. Never forgive." Zethmar shivered, despite the comfortable station temperature. He understood now. The humans were not passive. They were restrained. There was a difference. A crucial difference that his young prince did not understand. He continued researching, finding more pieces of the puzzle. After the First Contact War, humanity had consistently voted for peaceful resolutions in council disputes. They had contributed ships and resources to joint security operations. They had shared technology with species that had previously fought against them, but they had never forgotten. Their military remained strong. Their defenses remained vigilant, and every treaty they signed included clear terms about mutual respect and non-aggression. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, a human intelligence officer, had published a paper on post-conflict diplomacy that Zethmar found in an academic database. The paper discussed how humanity had studied every major galactic conflict in recorded history, learning from both victories and defeats of other species. "Human strategic thinking," Morrison wrote, "is built on a foundation of assumed hostility, tempered by hoped-for cooperation. We prepare for the worst while working toward the best. This allows us to engage in diplomacy from a position of strength without the need for aggressive posturing. Prepare for the worst while working toward the best." Zethmar sat back in his chair, the weight of understanding pressing down on him. His prince had been challenging a species that had fought 3 major powers to a standstill. A species that had built one of the largest fleets in known space. A species that had proven they could learn and adapt faster than anyone expected. And they had responded to those challenges with silence. Not because they were weak, not because they were afraid, but because they did not need to prove anything. They had already proven everything that mattered, and the galaxy knew it. Everyone knew it except Prince Kael Thor. Zethmar rushed back to their quarters. He had to tell his prince. He had to make him understand, before this situation went too far. But when he arrived, Kael Thor was preparing for another session. The prince was reviewing notes, preparing more challenges, more provocations. "My prince, I must speak with you urgently." "Not now, Zethmar. I have a speech prepared for today's session. I am going to propose that humanity's recent membership be reviewed. I will force them to defend themselves publicly. I will show everyone their weakness. My prince, please. I have discovered something important about the humans, about their history. Their history is brief and unimpressive. That is precisely my point. No, my prince. Their history includes a war they fought against 3 major powers. A war they fought. Rumors and exaggerations, Kael Thor interrupted. If there had been such a war, everyone would know about it. The records would be public. AI. The records are sealed by mutual agreement. But I have spoken with General Tharnex. He was there. He told me. Ah. Ma. Tharnex is old. Perhaps his memories are confused. Kael Thor adjusted his formal robes. I appreciate your concern, old friend. But I know what I am doing. The humans need to be reminded of their place. Today, I will do exactly that. Zethmar watched his prince leave. And for the first time in 90 years of service, he felt true fear for someone in the royal family. Not fear of physical harm. Fear of something worse. The fear that Prince Kyle Thor was about to learn a lesson that would haunt him forever. The main council chamber was filled to capacity. All 53 delegations had sent their full representation. This was an important session. The formation of a joint military task force was serious business, the kind of decision that shaped galactic politics for decades. Kyle Thor sat in the Vex's Nari section, his confidence restored. Zethmar's warnings from that morning already seemed distant and unimportant. The old advisor was beside him now, quiet and tense, but Kyle Thor barely noticed. His mind was on the upcoming discussion. The task force proposal had been circulating for weeks. Border security threats required a coordinated response from multiple species. The position of task force commander was prestigious and powerful. Whoever led it would control ships from dozens of different militaries, would make strategic decisions, affecting entire sectors of space. The Vex Nari had always led such operations. Always. For 12,000 years, when the galaxy needed military leadership, they turned to the Vex Nari Empire. This time would be no different. Or so Kyle Thor believed. The Council Arbiter's crystalline form glowed at the center of the chamber. We gather to address the formation of the Border Security Task Force. The Outer Rim attacks have continued. The threat is real and growing. We must respond with unity and strength. Murmurs of agreement echoed through the chamber. The task force will consist of ships and personnel from all willing member species. Command structure must be determined. The floor is open for nominations. The Korthan delegation stood first. The Korthan Dominion nominates Prince Kyle Thor of the Vex Nari Empire. His family has a long history of military leadership. The Vex Nari fleet is powerful and experienced. Kyle Thor stood and bowed, accepting the nomination gracefully. This was expected. This was tradition. Are there other nominations? The Arbiter asked. Silence. This too was expected. The Vex Nari nomination was essentially approval by consensus. No one challenged their right to lead military operations. But then a voice spoke from the seventh ring. The human delegation would like to make a nomination. Kyle Thor turned to look. Ambassador Parker was standing, his white hair bright under the chamber lights. Please proceed. The Arbiter said. Humanity nominates Commander Jason Miller to lead the Border Security Task Force. The chamber erupted. Delegates spoke rapidly among themselves. Even the usually stoic Drani swarm buzzed with agitated energy. A nomination from the seventh ring? A challenge to Vex Nari leadership? Kyle Thor felt his secondary heart skip beats. This was unprecedented, shocking, and foolish. Did they not understand how these things worked? The Arbiter's voice cut through the noise. A nomination has been made. Commander Miller, do you accept? Commander Miller stood slowly. He looked calm, as always, but something in his posture suggested weariness, as if he had hoped to avoid this moment, but knew it was inevitable. I accept the nomination, he said simply. Then we shall hear from both candidates, the Arbiter announced. Prince Kyle Thor, you may speak first. Kyle Thor moved to the central platform. This was his moment. He would show everyone why the Vex Nari deserved to lead, why humanity's challenge was absurd. Honored delegates, he began, his voice strong and clear. The Vex Nari Empire has provided military leadership to this council for thousands of years. We have protected trade routes, defended colonies, and maintained peace across 200 star systems. Our experience is unmatched. Our capabilities are proven. Our commitment is absolute. He paused, letting his words resonate. Leadership requires more than good intentions. It requires history, legacy, and the wisdom that comes only with time. The Vexnari have this wisdom. We have fought battles, won wars, and built an empire that has stood for 12,000 years. This is not arrogance. This is simply fact. He turned to look directly at the human delegation. Humanity has been in space for 50 years. 50 years of learning, of mistakes, of growing pains. They are to be commended for their progress. But progress is not the same as mastery. Would you trust a child to lead warriors into battle? Would you give command of your ships to those who are still learning the basics of space warfare? More murmurs, some of agreement. Kael'thor felt satisfaction building. He was winning them over. I respect humanity's enthusiasm. I acknowledge their contributions to council discussions. But this task force is too important for experimentation. Lives depend on these decisions. Territory depends on strategic wisdom. The galaxy depends on proven leadership. He bowed. The Vexnari are ready to serve, as we have always served. With strength, with experience, with the weight of history behind every decision. He returned to his seat amid polite applause. That had gone well. Very well. He had made the logical argument without directly insulting the humans. He had been diplomatic, while making his superiority clear. Now it was Miller's turn. The human commander walked to the central platform. He did not move with the dramatic flair that Kael'thor had used. He simply walked, like a man going to complete a necessary task. Miller stood at the center and looked around the chamber. His gaze passed over each delegation, making brief eye contact, acknowledging their presence. When his eyes reached the Vexnari section, he paused for just a moment, then moved on. Delegates, Miller began, his voice quieter than Kael'thor's, but somehow carrying more weight. Prince Kael'thor is correct about many things. The Vexnari do have a long history. They have provided leadership for millennia. They have accomplished great things. Kael'thor felt a moment of confusion. Was Miller agreeing with him? But this task force is not about history, Miller continued. It is about the future. It is about stopping threats that are evolving, adapting, learning. The prince spoke of experience and wisdom. These are valuable. But they are not enough if the threats we face are changing faster than we can adapt. Miller gestured, and a holographic display appeared. It showed the outer rim attacks, the patterns that humanity had identified weeks ago. Humanity has been tracking these attacks since they began. We identified the pattern. We predicted future targets. We were correct. Not because we are superior, but because we looked at the problem differently. We had no assumptions to overcome, no traditional approaches to defend. We simply looked at the data and saw what was there. He changed the display. Now it showed fleet compositions and response times. We have analyzed the defensive strategies currently in use. They are solid strategies, proven over centuries. But the enemy knows them too. They have adapted. They strike where our traditional deployments are weak. They avoid where our traditional strengths are positioned. Another change, this time showing possible alternative deployment patterns. We propose a new approach, smaller, more mobile response units. Unpredictable patrol routes. Mixed species crews to combine different tactical perspectives. Rapid adaptation protocols that allow field commanders to change strategies in real time without waiting for central command approval. Miller turned to face the entire assembly. The prince asked if you would trust a child to lead warriors. A fair question. But I ask a different one. When facing an enemy that changes constantly, do you want a commander bound by tradition, or one willing to try new approaches? Do you want someone who knows all the old answers, or someone willing to find new questions? He paused. I have fought in ways the prince cannot imagine. I have lost battles and learned from them. I have won battles by doing things that made no sense, according to traditional military doctrine. I am not asking you to choose me because humanity is better than the Vexnari. I am asking you to choose based on which approach gives us the best chance of stopping these attacks and protecting our people. Miller looked at Kael'thor directly now. The prince is a fine warrior and a capable leader. He would do an adequate job leading this task force using traditional methods. But adequate may not be enough. The question before you is simple. Do you want adequate, or do you want something more? Lime. In 10. The when to you men. We can start enter. He returned to his seat. The chamber was silent. The arbiter spoke. Both candidates have presented their positions. We will now vote. Each delegation will cast one vote. A simple majority will determine the task force commander. Kael'thor felt confident. Yes. Miller had made good points. But surely the established powers would not abandon tradition. Surely they would vote for experience over experimentation. All in favor of Prince Kael'thor as task force commander indicate now. Lights appeared above 3 delegations. The Vex Nari. The Regal Hierarchy. The Crimson Alliance. 3 votes. Kael'thor felt his confidence waver. Only 3? But surely others were still deciding. Still processing. All in favor of Commander Jason Miller as Task Force Commander, indicate now. The chamber lit up like a star field. Lights appeared above delegation after delegation. The Korthan, the Drani, the Zephyr, dozens more. Small powers and large ones. Species that had fought against humanity during the First Contact War and species that had been neutral. 47 votes. The universe seemed to tilt beneath Kael'thor's feet. 47 votes. For the human. For the commander, with only 50 years of experience. Commander Jason Miller is elected as Task Force Commander by majority vote, the arbiter announced. The council has spoken. Kael'thor sat frozen in his seat. This was impossible. This violated everything he understood about how power worked. The Vex Nari always led military operations. Always. But not today. Miller stood to give his acceptance speech. Kael'thor barely heard the words. Something about honor. About responsibility. About working together. The usual diplomatic phrases that meant nothing. But then Miller said something that cut through Kael'thor's shock. I want to thank all the delegations for their trust. I promise to earn it through actions, not words. We will form this task force immediately. I welcome input from all military traditions, including the valuable experience of the Vex Nari Empire. Together, we will protect our people. Together, we will adapt to new threats. Together, we will succeed. Together. As if the Vex Nari were just one voice among many, not the dominant power they had always been. The session ended. Delegates began filing out, many clustering around the human delegation to offer congratulations. Kael'thor watched as species after species approached Miller, shaking his hand, expressing support. The Korthan general was there. Well done, Commander. It is time for new thinking. Commander, the Korthan general. Well done. Commander, the Drani representatives swarmed around him. We look forward to serving under your command. Even the Zephyr, usually so aloof, floated over to express approval, and through it all, Miller remained calm. He accepted their congratulations gracefully, thanked them for their support, and made no grand statements of victory. He never once looked at Kael'thor. The prince sat in his seat long after the chamber had emptied. Zethmar remained beside him, silent and patient. How did this happen? Kael'thor finally whispered. They voted for the commander they believed would succeed, Zethmar said quietly. They voted based on capability, not legacy. But I am Vex Nari. We always lead. You assumed you would lead. Kael'thor turned to his advisor. You tried to warn me. About the war. About Miller. I did. Why did no one tell me before? Why did no one explain that the humans were actually strong? Zethmar was quiet for a long moment. My prince, everyone knew. The entire galaxy knew. That is why they voted as they did. The only person who did not know was you, because you were too busy telling everyone else what you thought they should be. The words struck like physical blows. Kale Thor felt something inside him crack. Not anger. Something deeper. Something closer to shame. He had spent a week insulting humanity, challenging them, mocking their experience. And they had simply accepted it all, with calm silence. And then the galaxy had voted. Not with words, but with action. 47 delegations had said clearly what they thought of human capability, what they thought of Vex's Nari assumption, what they thought of Kale Thor's judgment. I have made a fool of myself, the prince said softly. You have made a mistake, Zethmar corrected gently. There is still time to learn from it. But as Kale Thor left the chamber, he understood something terrible. He had not just lost a vote. He had revealed his ignorance to the entire galactic community. And worse, he had done so by repeatedly challenging the one species that did not need to prove anything to anyone. The silence of Commander Miller's response now made perfect sense. The human had not been afraid to answer. He had simply seen no point in arguing with someone who did not understand the situation. In that moment, walking through the empty corridors of Harmony's Gate, Prince Kale Thor finally realized that silence can cut deeper than any slight. The journey home was quiet. Kale Thor sat alone in his private quarters aboard the Vex's Nari transport ship, watching the stars blur past at faster-than-light speed. Zethmar had tried several times to speak with him, but the prince had waved him away. He needed time to think. Time to understand what had happened. 3 votes. Out of 53 delegations, only 3 had voted for him. His own empire, and 2 others that had old alliances with the Vex Nari. Even the Regal Hierarchy and Crimson Alliance, species that had fought beside the Vex's Nari in ancient wars, had voted for Miller, the human. The commander from a species, barely 50 years, in space. Kale Thor played the council session over and over in his mind. Not just the final vote, but everything leading up to it. Every challenge he had made. Every dismissive comment. Every time he had questioned human capability, and every time Miller had responded with that same calm acceptance. Never anger. Never defense. Just simple acknowledgement, and then moving on. As if Kale Thor's words were background noise. Unimportant. Not worth real attention. Now he understood. Miller had not been afraid to respond. Miller had simply not cared enough to respond. The human commander had been focused on important things, like security patterns and threat analysis. Kale Thor's provocations had been nothing more than distractions from real work. The thought made him feel small in ways he had never experienced before. When the ship reached Vex Nari space, a message was waiting. His father, the Emperor, requested his immediate presence. Kale Thor felt his multiple hearts sink. Word had already reached home about the vote. About his failure. The Imperial Palace was as grand as ever, but Kale Thor felt no comfort in its familiar halls. He moved through corridors he had known since childhood, each step heavy with dread. Servants bowed as he passed, but he sensed something different in their manner. News traveled fast in the palace. Emperor Kale Moore sat on the throne, his age showing in the silver of his skin and the slowness of his movements. But his eyes were still sharp, still intelligent. He watched his son approach with an expression that Kale Thor could not read. "Father," Kale Thor said, bowing deeply, "I have returned from Harmony's Gate. So I have heard, the entire empire has heard." The Emperor's voice was not angry, but it was not pleased either. "Tell me, my son, what did you learn at your first summit?" Kale Thor hesitated. He could make excuses. He could blame the humans for being deceptive about their strength. He could claim that the vote was politically motivated by jealousy of Vex's Nari power. But looking into his father's eyes, he found he could not lie. "I learned that I know very little about the current state of galactic politics," Kale Thor said quietly. "I learned that assumptions based on history can be dangerous, and I learned that I have much to learn." I, Emperor Kale Moore was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Good. That is the first step toward wisdom. Tell me what happened. Kale Thor told him everything. The provocations. Miller's calm responses. The vote. The shocking margin of defeat. His father listened without interruption. His expression, unchanging. When Kyle Thor finished, the Emperor spoke. The humans fought a war against 3 major powers 20 years ago. I assume you know this now? I learned it too late. Zethmar tried to tell me, but I did not listen. Do you know why the records of that war are sealed? Zethmar said it was part of the peace agreement. It was. But do you know who requested the sealing? The 3 powers who fought humanity? Or humanity itself? The sealing? To the 40. Kale Thor felt cold wash over him. Humanity requested it? They did. They could have used their victory as propaganda. They could have reminded the galaxy constantly of how they defeated established powers. They could have used our shame as a weapon. The Emperor leaned forward. Instead, they offered us dignity. They gave us a way to move forward without the weight of public defeat hanging over us. That is strategic wisdom, my son. That is the kind of thinking that makes a species dangerous. I did not understand, Kale Thor whispered. No, you did not. And because you did not understand, you challenged them publicly. You questioned their competence. You mocked their experience. The Emperor's voice hardened. You made our empire look foolish. You made me look like I raised a son who speaks without knowledge. You damaged relationships that took decades to build. Each word was a blow. Kale Thor felt shame wash over him in waves. However, the Emperor continued, his tone softening slightly. You are young. Young beings make mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them. Tell me, what would you do differently now? Kale Thor thought carefully before answering. I would listen more and speak less. I would research before making assumptions. I would treat other species with respect, regardless of how long they have been in space, and I would understand that silence can be a sign of strength, not weakness. The Emperor nodded. Better. Much better. Now go. Rest. Think about what you have learned. Your real education has just begun. Kale Thor left the throne room and returned to his private chambers. That night, sleep would not come. His mind kept replaying moments from the summit, but now, with understanding, those moments looked different. Miller's calm acceptance was not fear. It was confidence. The other delegation's reactions were not amusement at Kale Thor's challenges. They were concern, watching a young prince embarrass himself publicly. The vote was not a surprise to anyone except Kyle Thor himself. Days passed. Then weeks. Kale Thor threw himself into learning. He studied human history in detail. He read about the First Contact War, using the limited unclassified information available. He learned about human military doctrine, their rapid technological development, their philosophical approach to conflict and peace. The more he learned, the more he understood how blind he had been. Then, 3 months after the summit, news reached the Vex Nari Empire. Commander Miller's task force had been in action. Border piracy had dropped by 60%. The attacks that had plagued Outer Rim systems for years were now rare and poorly coordinated. Kale Thor watched the news reports obsessively. He saw footage of human ships working alongside Korthan vessels, Drani swarms, Zephyr crystals, and dozens of other species. The coordination was remarkable. The efficiency was undeniable. Miller had implemented the strategies he described in his speech: mixed crews, unpredictable patrol routes, rapid adaptation protocols. And it was working. Working better than anyone had expected. Then came the crisis. A rogue artificial intelligence had taken control of a mining station in the Beta Hydri system. 40,000 civilian workers were trapped. The AI threatened to destroy the station if anyone approached. Kale Thor watched as Miller's task force responded. The commander did not send overwhelming force. Instead, he sent 3 small ships with mixed crews. They approached from different vectors, using careful communication to avoid triggering the AI's defensive protocols. The operation took 6 hours. 6 hours of careful negotiation, technical work, and precise coordination. When it ended, all 40,000 civilians were safe. The AI was contained. Thence is other, thence is and not a single casualty had occurred among the rescue teams. The Galactic News Services called it a masterpiece of crisis management. Military analysts studied the operation, trying to understand how Miller had achieved such a perfect result. Kale Thor understood. Miller had not relied on traditional military force. He had used creativity, coordination, and careful planning. Exactly what he promised he would do. A week later, another message arrived from Kale Thor's father. It is time to return to Harmony's Gate. The task force is opening a permanent operations center on the station. Many delegations are sending permanent representatives. We must do the same. I am sending you. Kale Thor's heart skipped. Father, perhaps someone else would be better suited. My previous behavior, your previous behavior was a mistake. But you have spent 3 months learning from that mistake. Now you will return and show what you have learned. This is not a punishment, my son. This is an opportunity. Use it well. So Kale Thor returned to Harmony's Gate. This time, he arrived quietly, without grand expectations. He made no speeches. He simply reported to the Vex's Nari diplomatic office and began his work as a permanent representative. For the first 2 weeks, he avoided the human delegation entirely. He attended meetings, contributed when appropriate, but kept his distance from Commander Miller and his staff. But on the 15th day, fate intervened. Kale Thor was walking through one of the station's corridors, carrying documents to a committee meeting. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with someone coming the other direction. It was Commander Miller. They both stopped. For a moment, neither spoke. The corridor was empty except for the two of them. Kale Thor felt his heart racing. What should he say? What could he say? Miller looked at him with those calm eyes. No anger, no judgment, just that same steady gaze. Kale Thor gathered his courage. Commander Miller, I want to apologize. For my behavior during the summit. For the things I said. For questioning your capability when I knew nothing about you or your people. The words came faster now, spilling out. I was arrogant and ignorant. I made assumptions based on age rather than actual capability. I insulted you repeatedly, and you never responded with the anger I deserved. You remained professional while I acted like a child. I am deeply ashamed of my behavior. I understand if you cannot forgive me, but I needed you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. Miller listened to the entire speech without interruption. When Kale Thor finished, the human was quiet for a moment, as if considering his response carefully. Then he spoke, his voice as calm as ever. We noticed. Grow from it. That was all. 3 words. We noticed. Grow from it. Then Miller gave that same small nod from their first meeting and walked past, continuing on his way down the corridor. Kale Thor stood frozen, watching the human disappear around the corner. Not, I forgive you. Not, don't worry about it. Not even, thank you for apologizing. We noticed. Grow from it. The message was clear. Miller and the human delegation had seen everything Kale Thor did. They had noted it, understood it, and filed it away. But they had not wasted energy on anger or revenge. They had simply moved on to more important work. And now, they were giving Kale Thor the same advice they would give to any young officer making mistakes. Learn from it. Improve. Become better. No drama. No emotional confrontation. Just practical wisdom delivered in 3 words. Kale Thor felt something break inside him, But this time it was not shame. It was the final shattering of his old understanding of power and respect. In that moment, standing alone in the corridor, he truly understood what he had been too blind to see before. Strength was not about grand statements or ancient history. Strength was about competence, consistency, and the confidence to let actions speak louder than words. Humanity had this strength. Commander Miller embodied it perfectly, and Kale Thor had spent a week shouting at them, trying to make them prove something they had already proven to everyone except himself. Years passed. 5 years. Kale Thor remained at Harmony's Gate, as the Vex Nari representative. He worked quietly, contributed thoughtfully, and built a reputation not as a prince, but as a capable diplomat. He learned from those around him. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions instead of making pronouncements. He developed a working relationship with the human delegation. Not friendship exactly, but mutual professional respect. Commander Miller occasionally asked for his input on matters involving Vexnari space. Kale Thor provided it without expectation of praise or acknowledgement. The task force continued to succeed. Border security improved year by year. Miller's unconventional methods became standard doctrine. Other species began adopting human coordination techniques. One day, Kyle Thor was asked to speak at a diplomatic training program for young Vexnari nobles preparing for galactic service. These were princes and princesses like he had been, full of confidence in their ancient heritage. He stood before them, remembering his own journey. "I want to tell you about my first diplomatic summit," Kale Thor began. "I want to tell you about the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned. Because the most important thing I can teach you is this: your assumptions will fail you. Your confidence in ancient history will fail you. Your belief in superiority will fail you." He paused, looking at their shocked faces. Young nobles were not used to hearing such statements. I challenged a species I knew nothing about. I mocked their experience. I questioned their capability. I did all of this because I assumed that age equals wisdom and history equals power. He shook his head. I was wrong. Spectacularly wrong. And I humiliated myself and our empire in front of the entire galactic community. He told them about Miller, about the quiet responses, about the vote, about that moment in the corridor years later. Respect cannot be demanded, Kale Thor said. It must be earned through action, not declared through words. The humans understood this. I did not. And that difference taught me everything I needed to know about real strength. One of the young nobles raised a hand. But surely our history matters? Our 12,000 years of civilization must count for something? It counts for much, Kale Thor agreed. But only if we use that history to learn and grow, not to hide behind. The humans have 50 years in space and have accomplished things we did not achieve in millennia. Why? Because they focus on solving problems rather than proclaiming superiority. They adapt rather than rely on tradition. They prove their worth through actions rather than words. He paused again. There is an old Earth saying that Commander Miller once mentioned to me. Empty vessels make the most noise. I was an empty vessel making noise at Harmony's Gate. The humans were full vessels doing important work. After the lecture, Kale Thor returned to his quarters. On his desk was a message from his father. The Emperor was ill. Not seriously, but age was catching up with him. The message was brief. I am proud of what you have become, my son. You made mistakes, but you learned from them. That is all any father can hope for. Your real education was painful, but it was effective. Come home soon. I want to hear more about your work. Kale Thor smiled sadly. His father was right. His education had been painful, but it had been necessary. That evening, he attended a reception celebrating the task force's 5th anniversary. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered to honor the success. Commander Miller gave a short speech thanking everyone for their cooperation. Kale Thor watched from the crowd. Miller had gray in his hair now, more lines on his face, but his eyes were the same, calm, steady. focused on what mattered. After the speech, Miller made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Cale Thor stayed back, not wanting to intrude. But Miller spotted him and walked over. "Prince Cale Thor," Miller said, extending his hand. Cale Thor shook it. "Commander, congratulations on 5 years of success." "Thank you. I hear you've been doing good work with cross-cultural diplomatic initiatives. I try to contribute where I can." Miller smiled slightly. "You've grown a lot since that first summit. I had much to learn. We all do." Miller paused. "You know, I was harder on you than I had to be that day in the corridor. We noticed. Grow from it." Pretty harsh response to an apology. Cale Thor shook his head. "No, Commander. It was exactly what I needed to hear. You did not coddle me. You did not make it easy. You simply told me the truth. That is the greatest gift you could have given me." Miller studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I think you mean that. I do." In that moment, walking away from you in that corridor, I finally understood. Silence can cut deeper than any slight. Your lack of response to my provocations taught me more than any argument could have. You showed me through your actions what real strength looks like. And I have tried every day since to embody those lessons. "Good," Miller said simply. "The galaxy needs more people who can learn from mistakes. Gods know I made plenty of my own when I was younger." They talked for a few more minutes about current diplomatic situations. Then Miller moved on to speak with other delegates. Cale Thor watched him go, feeling something like peace. He had learned. He had grown. He had transformed shame into wisdom. Years later, when he became emperor himself, Cale Thor would tell the story of that first summit to anyone who would listen, not as an excuse, but as a lesson. He would make sure every young Vexisnari understood that age does not guarantee wisdom, that silence can be more powerful than words, and that true strength requires no proclamation. And he would always remember Commander Jason Miller, the human who taught him these lessons through the simple act of not caring enough to respond to provocations. The human who focused on important work while a young prince shouted for attention. The human who, through his silence, cut deeper than any slight ever could. In that corridor, on that day, Prince Cale Thor had finally understood. And in understanding, he had become something more than he was before. He had become wise.